So let's go ahead and get started on talking a little bit more about, we were finishing up with Sherwood Anderson's Hands. These questions of, of I guess you'd say, social and cultural standings, of course, are something that are key to modernism. The other thing with modernism is that you've got to remember, too, that there's some experimentation that's happening with the structures. And in this sense, Hands is kind of told in a different way or a different format. Now, Catherine Ann Porter, which I know that a lot of you said that it was very complex, and this kind of symbol, as is mentioned in Kristen's observations about the symbolic eating of the warm bleeding flowers, this idea, all of these kind of cultural indicators that bleed into this story do allow for a very intense exploration, and it does take a little bit of time to engage a lot of Porter's writing. I do think that this is a good story to expose yourself to, but I do understand that it does take a little bit of, of understanding and engagement with the text. I did mention, this idea that I mentioned to Kristen that everyone kind of should probably pick up on is that, we're 1914 and 1965. There is a fundamental assumption about art and humanity and life that is embraced in all the modernist texts, but it's not really just one thing. It is more than that. There's not just one observation that holds true for everyone. In case you were wondering, it's many little observations. So, whoops. Back to our posting. So I do think that that was something that was definitely an important portion of this. I also really appreciated Brittany's postings about the poetry itself. Leda and the Swan is one of the more famous poems from this period. However, the notion of, I guess you'd say, Helen, and which is kind of really focused on in this poem, does present this. And I love that Brittany has really followed this model of what does it say, what does it mean, and what is its value. This notion of value is inherent to this. And like I mentioned, I absolutely love this breakdown. The notion about style, everyone's agreeing that this is a very clear and focused presentation of information. And that's really, at the end of the day, what you want to do with your postings, is you don't just want to like a sense of it. I also appreciate Kelly's observations about Robert Frost. Now, most of you are probably familiar with Robert Frost. I took the road less traveled. Good fences make good neighbors. He was the poet laureate. He also spoke at Kennedy's inauguration. And he really is a very simplistic and a poet of the people. His poetry is much different than Yeats or Auden or Eliot. I know a lot of you had issues with T.S. Eliot, and even William Carlos Williams in many ways. But Robert Frost really does focus in the simplicity and this engagement. And I appreciate that observation, because Robert Frost is often viewed as he's not so modern, or he's not part of the canon. But he truly is one of the most modern poets out there. I also appreciate, when I was looking through Ryan's observations, I like that you picked up on, in particular in the Snows of Kilimanjaro, the story about sadness. I think one of the pervading themes of modernist poetry, modernist short fiction, and even novels is the sense of sadness, of mourning the loss, of the nostalgia in many ways. And you know that nostalgia is nostros, which is the return, and ulja, which is the painful, so it's the painful return. And so it really does focus on this sense of pain and loss, and I like that posting. Also, I particularly thought that the notion and the poetry readings that Ryan was doing here are very key. That it's not about you know, it's not just about seeing behind it, but it's seeing what it's about and through it. And I appreciate those observations because I think you've done a very good job with that. And your peers also wish to applaud you for that. And these are some great examples, like Kristen's is right here, super example of a very strong response back to a peer. And so I think that these are some awesome touchstones for you to look at as you're preparing for the final. Or not the final, I'm sorry, for the midterm. Also, I do want to mention Troy's because I enjoyed reading Troy's. And I like Troy's because he has his own observations about the readings and about the way that he wants to integrate them. And remember, even though I tell you that this is what your postings need to entail, you do not have to have a formula. This isn't math, this is literature. So you can go ahead and have some fun with it. For instance, like with this, he says, I will say this, as at the completion of reading Fitzgerald's Babylon Revisited, I was clear on what it was for me to post. The story for me had a nerve, to say the least. It reminded me how in the end of 2007, 2008, you know, suffering this crash, he wanted to root for Charlie. You know, he brought in his own personal observations. You know, this love for money, this love for, you know, like all of these things that Charlie is facing, and he integrated them with his own experiences. And I think that's the other part of literature that we're kind of losing in some places when we're just doing straight summaries. Summaries are important, but it's not just about what it says, it's about what does it mean to you and what is its value. And that's also in the broad sense of a person. Remember, you can read a work for what it says about the work. You can read a work for what it says about the audience or the reader, like Troy did. You can read the work for what it says about the world around it, like I believe it was Kristen, and also like Brittany, and also I believe it was Curtis and Shannon, Priscilla too, and Dina. You can read it for what it says about the universe, the surrounding culture, or you can read it for what it says about the author. For instance, when we took a look at Dina's, when she really covered Fitzgerald. So there's 4 points of interest into this. This goes to M.H. Abrams, an amazing literary scholar. And he says you can look at the work from the perspective of how it relates to the work itself, how it relates to the audience or the reader, how it relates to the world around it, or how it relates back to the author. And remember, those are 4 good ways to think about positioning yourself as you are writing these summaries and these postings and these discussions and these engagements. And even think about these are the ways that you can write your essays for the short answers for the midterm and even in preparation for the final. So I wish you lots of luck if you have not taken the midterm yet. I wish you, you know, if you have and you're already finished, well, then it looks like you've got a nice week to just kind of catch up, relax, regroup, maybe read ahead, get yourself prepared. If you do have any questions, comments, or concerns, feel free to contact me. Thanks so much and have a great day.